Hello, dearly beloved. Welcome to another episode of the Priscilla Mission. Today, I'll be discussing what I call marriage and the church. After my last episode, I discovered that there was a campaign that has been going on the social media for a while about the influence of the church on the marriage of believers. And I went into the debate. I looked at what was going on, what people were discussing, and I was able to pinpoint some things in the discussion. And I'm going to mention some of the things that have come up in the campaign. Many people feel that the influence of the church today on the marriage process of a believer is too much, to the extent that churches or denominations, different denominations, now feel that they should give consent when it comes to the issue of two believers coming together in marriage. And I threw out a question, and I was able to harvest a lot of views about this topic. But before I go into the topic and discuss some of the views I have harvested and my own review of these views, I'd love to draw attention to the topic that I started from the last episode on the influence of postmodernism on the church or on believers today, and what some people call contending the faith on the social media. I discovered that in the last episode I was talking about a modeled voice, that the Christian voice today on the social media has been modeled. So I mentioned the fact that what a lot of people call deconstruction of, what a lot of people call defending the faith, is a deconstruction of everything that they can deconstruct. Every concept, the construction of every concept, every truth, every tradition that stood for a while in the church. That is what people are doing, and that is what the people are doing, and they call it defending the faith. And I discovered that this deconstruction is part of what is being done in this campaign against the influence of the church on the marriage of a believer. So I threw out a question. I said, is marriage spiritual or cultural to a believer? And what is the influence, or what part should the local assembly that a believer belongs play in a believer's marriage process? And I harvested a lot of views. Now I'm going to itemize some of the views I harvested. A lot of people agreed that marriage is predominantly spiritual. And they also agreed that marriage is cultural. But a very few people felt that marriage should just be left in the realm of culture, while some people said that marriage is also a legal contract. Some other people, but a few, said that marriage is carnal and biological and not spiritual. Now, what I discovered in all these views is that two words are not well understood in the way they are used. The word spiritual and the word cultural. A lot of us do not actually look at these words when we discuss marriage or when we discuss issues relating to them. When we mention the word spiritual, a lot of people think we are talking about something that is outside the body or outside the physical world. While the word spiritual can be used in that sense, most often the predominant use of the word spiritual has about 4 senses. It could mean something outside the physical world that belongs to the spirit world. That's one sense. Another sense is anything relating to the spirit world, anything relating to the spirit of man. That's another sense. Another sense is anything relating to a religious life, the precepts, the rules and regulations, the teachings of a religious life. Another sense of the word spiritual is anything that relates to God. God is spirit. So anything that emanates from God or from any spirit or anything, any entity we call spirit is spiritual. So when we now say something is spiritual, in Christian parlance, it could mean these 4 things. But when we say something, when we say marriage is spiritual, we are not saying that marriage is something we do outside the body. We are not saying that marriage is something we do, it's something that pertains to the spirit. No. We are using the word spiritual in relation to marriage in 2 senses. That we are using it as a concept that originates from God. So when we say marriage is spiritual, we are saying marriage originates from God, who is a spirit. When we say marriage is spiritual also, we are saying that the precepts, the teachings of our religion, whether the religion is Christianity or the religion is Islam or Buddhism, when you do marriage or you go through a marriage process according to the teachings of these religions, no matter the religious beliefs, then that marriage is not predominantly cultural. That marriage is spiritual. Now, to the Christian, when we say marriage is spiritual, we are saying marriage, God instituted marriage. It originated from him. It's his idea. So, in that balance, marriage is spiritual. And when you now do a Christian marriage, you follow the precepts of the scriptures in contracting a marriage, in getting a life partner, in contracting a marriage, into the wedding and after the wedding, that marriage is spiritual. For instance, let me cite an example with the marriage of Isaac. The marriage of Isaac was a spiritual marriage. It was more spiritual. It was only the contracting of the marriage of Isaac that followed the traditions of the parents of Rebekah and the traditions of that time. Now, what do I mean by saying that the marriage of Isaac is was spiritual? Abraham could have allowed Isaac to marry from Canaan, where he was dwelling. But because Abraham had the covenant of God, and he wanted the people who had the consciousness of God, he sent Eliezer to his family in Haran to get a wife from that tribe. So if we look at it today, let's bring it to the New Testament. Paul said that a believer should marry in the Lord. That was what Abraham did. When you marry in the Lord, that marriage is spiritual. So when you follow the precepts of the Bible, Paul said that the marriage bed should be undefiled. That is, there shouldn't be premarital sex in a marriage. Before a marriage is contracted, before a husband and a wife, before they come together in marriage. So when you follow these precepts of the Bible, then your marriage is spiritual. That is, your marriage is following God's rules and regulations. So it is spiritual. So let me define the word cultural. The word cultural is more than what people are using it to mean. When we say something is cultural, we are talking about something that follows how a culture of a place is, or the traditions of a particular people, the culture, the precepts of people of a particular community or a particular society. So when you say marriage is cultural, you are saying that marriage follows the precepts of your society, your community, or your tribe. That your parents, if you now go by this definition, that your parents give consent in your marriage does not make that marriage cultural. When we talk about polygyny, we talk about polygamy, then you're talking about cultural marriage. When we are talking about, how a man should own a woman as a property, you're talking about cultural marriage. So I want us to be very careful in using these words. When a believer now claims that because I seek the consent of my parents to get married, that their marriage is cultural, I kind of wonder if you actually will follow the traditions of your people in total for that marriage to be cultural. For instance, will you allow your husband, as a woman, will you allow your husband to marry a second wife? Will you allow your husband to own you as a property? Will you, there are many things in our culture. For instance, where I am from, in our culture, there are things that are used to contract the marriage. During the marriage process, there are things to follow. There are traditional things that people do that are not that, they pertain to maybe the gods that our society or our families worship. Now, when you say your marriage is cultural, can you submit yourself to some of these things? These are questions I want to leave us with. So when we use the word cultural, something is cultural, we should be careful. Now that I've defined these two words, I will say that while I agree with many of the views that say that marriage is spiritual, I cannot 100% agree with the views that say that marriage is cultural. Marriage is spiritual. I don't know the word, because if I say marriage is familial, that is, marriage pertains to, that's the adjective of the word family. Now, marriage also depends on a family traditions. That's the way I would say it. Those are the two things I have come up with the views people gave. The summary is that marriage for a believer is predominantly spiritual, and marriage is also dependent on parental or family traditions. Family traditions. That is the way I would see it. Not culture, not societal culture. Your parents can actually determine the things they want in their traditions to be in your wedding, or to, like that. They can determine. So, marriage depends on the principles of God in the scriptures and on the rules and regulations, the things or the traditions that are accepted or acceptable to your family, to your parents. This is where I will end this episode. In the next episode, I will be discussing what should be the role of the local church that a believer attends in the marriage process. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.